I'm supposed to go this way or this way, but we'll try to avoid pops. My name is Cindy Walton, and I am your worship associate this morning, part of the team that's bringing this service to you. Good morning again. Okay, we are an inclusive congregation that welcomes you as you are, inclusive of all your identities, your complexities and situations. We welcome your whole self, even if it isn't fully assembled, because we recognize that we are all a work in progress and that we are all in this together. Our service is being posted on YouTube and on Facebook, where you can take advantage of watching it again if you want to see what Bruce has to say twice. And we welcome everybody wherever you might be. So, if you'd like to take a second now to greet one another in whatever manner strikes your fancy, if you want to wave, if you want to hug, if you want to shout out across the room, whatever you want to do. Aha. Yeah, I was going to say, we want to make sure to show off my Nike swoop. Okay, now then, would you join me in saying our opening affirmation? Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human mind. For these high purposes do we unite in worship. And as we light our chalice this morning, I have a poem from Rebecca A. Edmiston Lang. She is a UU minister, entitled Prayers and Dreamings. Spirit within all, mysterious force giving shape to life, miraculous source and river of being, help us to know who we are, to see our place in the history of the earth and in the family of things. Help us to see that we are part of all that ever was, our grandmother's prayers and our grandfather's dreamings, our mother's courage and our father's hope. In our bones lies the calcium of antediluvian creatures. In our veins courses the water of seas. We are part of all that ever was, born of this earth, riders upon a cosmic ocean. We are not separate from nature. We are nature. Part of that same spirit that turns scales into feathers and birdsong into speech. We live by the sun, we move by the stars, we eat from the earth, we drink from the rain. O great Spirit, help us know who we are and fill us with such love for this holy creation and gratitude for this awesome gift we call living, that we might claim our inheritance and live out our calling to bless the world and each other with our care. Blessed be. Amen. And as we welcome Danny Dobrovich this morning to share a song with us, I have a request. And my request is this, that we refrain from our habitual clapping and simply sit in silence as he completes his song so that we might more closely hear what he's bringing us.
You who are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye, and teach your children well. Their father's hell will totally go by, and don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh, and know they love you. And you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by, so please help them with your youth. They seek the truth before they can die, and teach your parents well. Your father's hell will slowly go by, and don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh, and know they love you. I'm going to do that last verse, see if I get the words right this time. And you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by, so please help them with your youth. They seek the truth before they can die. Teach children well. Their father's hell did slowly go by. Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh, and know they love you.
Thank you, Danny. That was lovely. And now we have Richard Fennell bringing us a story for all ages.
This is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked one down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference.
And now's the time we get to share our joys and sorrows and concerns. If you would like to share this morning, please come up and say your name into the microphone and light a candle for whatever is on your heart. And I think I'll start this morning. In case you missed it, whoops, I think it's not on, maybe. Goes to my other ear. Okay. Just a word to the wise. Don't try to knock a hole in a street with your head. It hurts, and the street will win every time. And here's a final candle for all the joys and sorrows and concerns deeply felt, but not spoken this morning. And now it's Richard's turn again to bring us a reading.
Hey everybody, it's me again. This is another poem I found by Jim Yearman. It's called How Do We Want to Float? From the moment we are born, we begin our journey down the river of time. It's the same river everyone travels. It's where all our journeys blend. However, we don't control how long we'll be on the river or when our journey ends. We are floating solo on the river of time. There is no boat. What determines the type of journey we will have is how we choose to float. If we float with love in our hearts, and kindness, and compassion, and honesty, with our hearts unburdened, we are light up on the water, and we float more effortlessly. We float more peacefully this way. How smoothly across the water we glide. We lay back, allowing the current to take us. And there's a good chance we enjoy the ride. If we float with anger, hatred, resentment, this burdens our heart, weighs it down, pulling us down more as we float across the water. There's a good chance we might drown. Our floating is more labored, more painful. Our discomfort, we can't hide. We work to keep our heads above the water, and it's much harder to enjoy the ride. Knowing our journey on the river of time will one day come to an end, as it does for everyone, there is a question we must ask ourselves before the journey's done. Since our ride will not last forever, since one day our time on the river will cease. Would we rather float in pain, or would it be better to float in peace?
I trust that Bruce is going to share poetry as well, since the rest of the service so far has been poetry. And thank you, Richard. Those are some good things to think about. I have one more poem I want to share. This one is from Gavin Dominique, who is 13 years old, in the 7th grade. It's titled, I am from the smell of fresh cake, the smell of bacon and fruit salad, the smell of pumpkin bread and pancakes, from Frito pie in the crock pot and spicy curry chicken. I am from lifelong friendships, memories in the sandbox. I'm from red tomatoes and juicy strawberries, from hot suns and dry deserts. I'm from worm-filled soil, from chocolate flowers and rosemary, scents that waft around me in the hammock under the shade of the big willow. I'm from the fresh mountain air, leaves clapping in the wind. I'm from the wishes and whispers of the field. I'm from the tops of the trees, the dusty wind, and the chirping birds. I am from the earth, cracked and broken, beautiful and full of life. Let's take a moment of silence to consider where we're from and where we're going. Blessed be. And now we get to hear from Bruce, for whom I have no introduction.
Don't panic, it's not the entire notebook. But I have to get my cheaters on here. I could do some limericks, but I don't think that would be acceptable. So I'm used to not speaking with a script, so I will try to stick to the script this time. And so how did I end up here? Well, I like that slide. That's really good. Thanks, John. When Claudia approached me 3 weeks ago and asked me if I would be interested in presenting a message, she said I could speak on anything I wanted to. That was a generous and daunting proposition, all wrapped up into a single request. Asking a lapsed Southern Baptist who is accustomed to speaking on ideas and topics and is positively positive that he has all the right answers is asking for trouble. I suspect that after Claudia asked me to speak, she could see the wheels and gears grinding in my head, and so she then offered up this wise suggestion. Folks always like to learn more about how a person came to be a member of our fellowship. I thought that over for about a day and decided to do just that, to give a TED Talk style brief overview on how I came to start attending and then became a member of our fellowship. And I will keep it brief enough so we can beat the Baptists to the restaurants. Some of you know from past conversations I was born and raised in Abilene, Texas. I had no choice but to grow up attending the First Baptist Church, which was one of the larger churches in Abilene. My paternal grandparents always attended the First Baptist churches in the towns where they lived, including Tulia and Vernon here in the Panhandle area. My grandfather's name is on the cornerstone of Vernon's First Baptist Church. As the building secretary of the building committee when they built the large auditorium back in the mid-1920s. No other named Baptist church would suffice for my grandparents. It was first or nothing. So John, now's time for the first photo. This is interesting. I forgot I even had this photo. But this was taken at the Frying Pan Farm Home of William H. Bush, Carolyn Bush's father, Mary Emine's grandfather. My grandfather is the handsome guy sitting underneath the first arch with his back up against the stone work. And it's unusual for me to see him with dark hair. He was totally white by the time he was 40. I guess my dad drove him crazy. So that's just a unique thing. They were up here in the Vernon area for many, many years, and he was headed up the Chamber of Commerce in Tulia for about 10 years. So when my grandfather was a deacon, while he was a deacon in every church they joined, I suspect that attending the named first churches had more to do with my grandmother's drive than my grandfather's. My grandmother was a 5 foot 2 inches tall dynamo who never failed to achieve a task or goal once she put her mind to it. She became the first woman to be named Abilene's Citizen of the Year in 1955 by the Abilene Chamber of Commerce, and she won that award for being in charge of raising over $250,000 over 3 years to build the Women's Club in Abilene. I looked it up, and that would be equal to raising $2.5 million today. So whatever she said usually went in that family. So based on my being a member of Abilene First Baptist Church and being baptized at 6 years old and attending there until I left for college in 1971, I became steeped in the doctrines of being a Christian as prescribed by the Southern Baptist Church. Besides, when it came to early indoctrination of children, it was impossible to resist the graham crackers and milk that we received in Sunday school every week. Once hooked on those treats, kids will listen to almost anything. Now, I don't recall being all that religious, but I did absorb the overall beliefs, and I certainly didn't question those beliefs while growing up. I could go into a lot of those beliefs, but Jim Allison told me not to do so. So we'd be here a long time. But after graduating high school in 1971, I had decided to attend college at what was then called San Angelo State University. It's now part of the Texas Tech system. And I planned to major in history. But at nearly the last minute, to make a final decision, my grandmother intervened and took me on a trip to Brownwood, Texas, to explore Howard Payne College, a small Baptist-based college. She and my grandfather met there in 1912, when it was a 2-year prep school for Baylor University. I was fine with that alternative because, one, it had a small enrollment size of about 1,200 students. It's not much bigger than that today, actually. 2, it had a special liberal arts discipline path that let me major in history, political science, sociology, and pre-law. And 3, it wasn't Baylor, a place I knew I didn't want to go because of the fact that my grandparents, my father, and several cousins had already beaten me there, and I'd have to live down their reputations. Of course, being a Baptist-affiliated college, Howard Payne required at least some mandatory courses in religion, and I took those and ended up selecting Bible and Christian doctrine as my minor program. I enjoyed learning about the details of Christian doctrines and ethics while still not being all that spiritual or religious. And while at Howard Payne, of course, I attended First Baptist Church Brownwood, once a firster, always a firster. The best thing, though, was meeting Amy on a blind date on November the 10th, 1971, our freshman year, and having her put up with me close to 51 years. As for my mindset on being a Christian believer while at Howard Payne, here is my concluding paragraph from a book report I wrote about a book titled Man and His Gods. It matters not how one worships God, just so long as one believes upon God. The Bible is a poor historical document, but it is an excellent revelation of God to man. If Christians based their belief on God upon the Bible's historicity, they would be in a poor condition when it comes to knowing God. But by accepting the Bible as God's self-revelation to man and by believing by faith in God's existence, Christians do not have to worry about the historical contradictions contained in the Bible. That tells you pretty much the Baptist doctrine in a nutshell. Fast forward to 1997, where we had moved to Amarillo, where I worked when I worked for Western National Life. And there I kept seeing a signature by a Dr. Tom Nichols on medical decisions regarding annuity payouts. We had been attending Trinity Baptist Church on Wolfland for a few years. I finally broke from the first habit anyway. And Trinity was a conservative, Bible-believing evangelical church. The pastor there was giving a class on Genesis, and he made it clear that the Hebrew word for day in the creation story could only mean a 24-hour timeline. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. His view was that God, being omnipotent and capable of creating the universe, could certainly manage to create the earth and all its inhabitants in only 6 24-hour days. Knowing that was not correct, when I talked to him about it briefly after the class, he made it clear that he was a Bible literalist, and that settled the matter as far as he was concerned. Well, that disagreement became my tripwire, so to speak. I decided to start exploring the historicity of the Bible and Christian beliefs, having not really thought much about those topics since graduating from Howard Payne in 1975. Over the next few years, I went from being a somewhat spiritual Christian, believing, accepting person who had these 6 versions of the Bible. So for the next photo, these are the 6 I found easily in my house. There's 2 or 3 more. But the Ryrie Study Bible in the middle is the most strict. It's the New American Standard. This is the only kind of version you need Bible when it first came out. And so I went from someone that had those versions of the Bible to someone who changed how one looked at the Bible's origins. If you'll do the next slide, John. This will give you an idea of some of the reading I did in the history of the Bible, particularly the Red Book, the first 3,000 years of Christianity. That's a very interesting, well done book. The one on top, though, is fun to read, Bible Babble. I like that one. And then I went from there to a general idea of deities and religions. John, if you'll advance it one more time. To studying the world religions just in general. Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, I started my historical research on the origins of Christian writings with this college textbook, and this is one more. The New Testament, a historical introduction to the early Christian writings by Bart Ehrman. Now, Bart Ehrman is the professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. He's written over 20 books on the history of the documents, letters, and gospels in both the Old and New Testaments. He emphasizes the historical aspects of the writings while not making any judgments on the religious or faith beliefs that people may have about the Bible and its documents. Ehrman's background gives him credence in that he was raised in a congregational and Episcopalian upbringing and had a born-again experience and became so serious about his faith that he went to a fundamentalist Bible college, Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Some of you may have heard of that. And he went there to train for the ministry. He eventually finished his university years by graduating from Princeton with a PhD in New Testament studies and a Master's of Divinity degree. The more I read Ehrman's textbook, which is, by the way, the only college textbook that I ever read cover to cover, I began to see and had to admit that the Bible was not inerrant as I had been taught for my days in church and at Howard Payne. I came to see that the Bible is a very human book with all the marks of having come from human hands. As our fellow UU member Tony Tackett pointed out in his talk to us a few weeks ago, A Blasphemer's Guide to the Bible, it is full of discrepancies, contradictions, errors, and different perspectives of different authors living at different times in different countries and writing for different reasons to different audiences with different needs. I'll share just one brief example from Ehrman's textbook, the story of Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, as told in the book of Acts, first in chapter 9, verses 1 through 19, then chapter 22, 6 through 16, and lastly in chapter 26, verses 12 through 18. First, when Jesus appears to Paul in chapter 9, Paul's companions heard the voice but saw no one. But when Paul recounts the tale in chapter 22, he claims that they all saw the light but did not hear the voice. The second one, in chapter 9, Paul's companions are left standing while Paul is knocked down to the ground by his vision. But according to chapter 26, they all fall to the ground. And the third one, in the first account, Paul is instructed to go into Damascus to receive instruction from a disciple of Jesus named Ananias. In the last account, he is not sent to Ananias, but is instructed by Jesus himself. We will never know why Paul's conversion story, one of the most important stories in the entire New Testament, given Paul's actions as recorded later on in his letters, we will never know why it changed 3 times in Acts. Luke, traditionally considered to be the author of Acts and Paul's helper, might have heard 3 different versions of the story and put them all in just to be sure at least one of them was correct. But this brief example does show that you can't call the Bible inerrant, as staunch evangelicals like to stress. A second reason that led me to give up my original beliefs in the idea that there is only one way to salvation and to leading a fulfilling and meaningful life is a reason that many UUs cite and that they're well aware of: the sheer number of religions and faith beliefs in the world today. There is between 2,500 and 4,000 religions and faiths being practiced in the world today, based on 3 sources I looked up in research for this message. There are over 50 U.S. national organizations and bodies of believers calling themselves Baptists just here in the U.S. The most intriguing name I found so far is Two Seed in the Spirit Predestination Baptists. I'm a little scared to even look that one up. But once one considers all of the historically past religions and beliefs, starting with Egyptian beliefs in the afterlife, going through Babylonians, Assyrian, Phoenician, Jewish, Persian, Greek, Roman, etc., the only honest conclusion that I could come to is that Homo sapiens created and continue to create their deities and beliefs to try and accept the fact that we know we will not live forever. My third and last reason I'll mention for my falling away from religion and faith-based beliefs is the problem of how to explain or address the pain and suffering that is in the world today and that has existed since time immemorial. How can a supposedly all-loving, all-caring, omnipotent, and omniscient deity allow the creatures it supposedly created to worship the said deity by subjugating them to so much suffering? Why believe in a deity that failed to save its own chosen people from the Holocaust? For that failure alone, I don't believe in any man-made deity, nor the doctrines or creeds that man has made up to try and appease it. And the problem of pain is one of the main reasons Bart Ehrman, by the way, started down his path as well. Like many people who changed their root ideas, concepts, and beliefs from one side of life's pendulum to the other side, I read the main books on atheism and agnosticism, The God Delusion and The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins, God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens, Breaking the Spell by Daniel Dennett, and the classic Why I Am Not a Christian by Bertrand Russell. They all make their points in logical ways that I agree with. So while I no longer believe in any deity or religion, I don't feel the need to argue about my beliefs with anyone or try to sway someone to believe as I do. I now consider myself to be a secular humanist atheist who strives to let others believe what they choose to believe. Now, this viewpoint is what has led me to the Unitarian Universalist organization and specifically to this fellowship. Secular humanism is certainly one of the main beliefs of being a UU, as expressed in our principles, particularly a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And believe it or not, humanism is the dominant belief in the Unitarian Universalist organization, based on a survey done by the UUA in 1997 titled Fulfilling the Promise. Almost 10,000 UUs responded to the survey, and the findings were 46% said they were humanist, 19% said they had an earth or nature-based theology, 13% said they were theist, 9.5% said they were Christian. Mystics were 6.2%, Buddhists 3.6%, Jewish 1.3%, Hindu 0.4%, Muslim 0.1%, and other came in at 13.3%. Not sure how that works, but that's what they found. So what does it mean to be a humanist? Well, the American Humanist Association has this explanation in their FAQs on their website. Humanism is a worldview which says that reason and science are the best ways to understand the world around us, and that dignity and compassion should be the basis for how you act towards someone else. Humanism is non-theistic. By this, we don't mean to say there is no God. Instead, we say that there is no proof for the existence of God, any gods, the supernatural, or an afterlife. Therefore, we take very seriously the idea that No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. We are living the only life we'll have in the only world we know about. The responsibility for the choices we make are ours and ours alone. I think one of the best definitions of humanism is found in the book The God Argument, The Case Against Religion and for Humanism by A.C. Grayling, a professor of philosophy and master of the New College of Humanities in London. Grayling writes, "Humanism is an outlook based on two allied general premises, which between them allow a good deal of leeway to what follows from them. The first premise is that there are no supernatural agencies in the universe, and the second connected premise is that our ethics must be drawn from and responsive to the nature and circumstances of human experience. It therefore starts from the fact that human beings exist in an entirely natural universe governed by natural laws, and that human good is shaped accordingly." Today, the following quote from Jerry DeWitt, a former evangelical pastor of two churches in Louisiana, who publicly converted to atheism in 2011, I think fits me to a T. John, one last photo there. "Skepticism is my nature, free thought is my methodology, agnosticism is my conclusion, atheism is my opinion, humanitarianism is my motivation." So that, in a nutshell, is how I ended up here at our fellowship just over 11 years ago. However, let me add that I wouldn't be here if not for the people I've come to know, respect, and care about. To put a twist on the rejoinder by Groucho Marx that he wouldn't ever join any club that would admit him as a member, I have found a very special group of people who did let me join, and I am ever grateful for taking this less traveled road with you all. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Bruce. Lots of good things to think about there. And now is the time that we express our appreciation for this place and our caring and desire for it to continue through our gifts of monetary contributions. If you have made a pledge, please keep up your pledge. And for a few announcements, just a reminder, the Nothing Much Buddhist group meets every Monday at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. If you need more information, you can contact Rick Todd or Tony Tackett. Our book club meets every fourth Tuesday of the month, led by our own Dick Mosley. Always an interesting and enlightening conversation about wonderful books. Sunday mornings at 10, the Knowledge Seekers are meeting, sharing various TED Talks and discussing those. If you want to come and talk about all kinds of things, 10 o'clock is a good time. And next Sunday, we have our own Rick Todd talking about a Buddhist contemplates climate change. He's eminently qualified to do that, being a um, as a PhD in agricultural science and biology. We always can use volunteers. We are a volunteer organization after all, so if there's something you might like to do, we would be glad to have you do it. And before I extinguish the chalice, I have a question. You have in your hands a reading that I would like for us to do together. My question is, do you want to sing Spirit of Life as well as doing the reading together, or would you like to forego singing this time and do the reading? The reading? Okay. All right. Okay, so we extinguish our chalice, taking with us all that we have heard and felt this morning, and knowing that it will illuminate and enlighten our lives until we come again next week. And now, as you feel inclined, I invite you to take the hand or touch the shoulder or in other ways that you feel comfortable, make physical contact with people in the room. So you can stand, you can sit, you can dance, whatever you'd like. But keep one hand free so that you can see the reading, because we're all going to make it together. As we know and as we have talked about today, in our tradition, each of us blesses another and bless the world. Therefore, I invite everyone here to participate in this blessing. The words are ordinary, but we make the blessing real through our shared intention. As we have been blessed, so we bless one another to be a blessing. Breathe in, breathe out. This breath we share with all that breathes. Feel the love of the universe flowing through this community into you and out into the universe again. Let the love of all the universe, your love, flow outward to its height, its depths, its broad extent. You are more than you know, and more beloved than you know. Take up what power is yours to create safe haven, to make of earth a heaven. Give hope to those you encounter, that they may know safety from inner and outer harm. Be happy and at peace, healthy and strong, caring and joyful. Be the blessing you already are. That is enough. Blessed be. Amen. May the fellowship of this hour touch and move our lives until we come again together.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that